This Sunday, the Shakespeare Society is celebrating the Bard's 442nd birthday. You didn't know he was that old. They'll be holding a 4-hour Shakespeare Marathon at Symphony Space. Michael Sexton, the artistic director of the Shakespeare Society, joins me now, along with two of the actors performing in the marathon, two wonderful actors, Sean Leonard and Michael Cumpsty, and I'm very pleased to welcome them all to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Michael Sexton, what's the Shakespeare Society's mission? Do you need to spread the word that Shakespeare is a very great playwright, maybe the best ever?
I'm not sure we need to spread the word of that, but pursuing the work and giving actors a chance and our audience and members a chance to enjoy and further understand the work is really the mission. The Shakespeare Society is a non-for-profit membership organization. We were founded about 9 or 10 years ago, and by Nancy Becker and Adriana Mnuchin. And the mission is to promote the understanding and enjoyment of the Bard's work through a combination of performance, commentary, and we do educational outreach work as well.
Well, there was a time when even the roughest prospectors of the gold rush wanted to see Shakespearean plays. Do you think that today the audience for these plays is a little more limited?
No, I mean, he's a tremendous draw, as Michael Cumpsty knows now. I mean, who just did a very successful production of Hamlet down at Classic Stage Company. The audience is actually very large. He's still a draw, which is remarkable, 442 years later. And we have 600 members who love being members, and they're very enthusiastic, interested people from a wide variety of backgrounds.
In Britain, most actors cut their teeth on Shakespeare. It's less likely in this country, but Michael Cumpsty, didn't you begin your career performing some Shakespeare?
Well, I did. I didn't actually, even though I am English by birth, I didn't start my career in England. I had come over here to university and became a professional actor in the States and have pretty much stayed here ever since, with the exception of one job for the RSC in Stratford about 4 years ago. But you're right that the traditional training in Britain and indeed in Europe is more in a company rather than a conservatory, as it tends to be here. And
although that's changing, isn't it, as we see more and more young actors start in films as they do in this country. Yeah,
and one of the things I noticed when I was over in Britain working a few years ago is that even the kids who had the traditional training in places like RADA were coming out, doing a couple of seasons at the RSC just as a paycheck, but fully intending to move into film as soon as possible, which is in some ways unfortunate. But I was in a training program which didn't have a lot of class time. We did a lot of rep work. We were associated with a regional theatre down at the University of North Carolina, an old regional theatre called Playmakers, and so we did a lot of plays, and I did a lot of Shakespeare. But I also had the great good fortune to work with a woman called Cicely Berry, who was the master voice coach for the RSC at the time. So I kind of got the best of both worlds. But I do believe that what we need to do here in terms of promoting Shakespeare training is to give young people both the opportunity to perform it on a regular basis, but also good, solid text and voice work to make it, to bring it up technically, to sort of bring it up to standard.
Well, how important is performing in Shakespeare before you go on to other things? Does it prepare you for doing O'Neill or Miller or Williams or Tony Kushner?
I would say that if you can do Shakespeare well, then you have all the tools to do anything. You do, perhaps, Sir Richard Eyre, who used to run the National Theatre, said once that he sometimes finds it kind of poignant to watch great stage actors begin to do film because they're often just too big, and that bigness makes them seem vulnerable and sort of insecure on the screen. And I think
took Jason Robards a while to figure out how to do movies.
Yeah. And I think, in fact, that's true of Ian McKellen, too. When you look at Ian McKellen's early film work, it's pretty Baroque, and he's pulled that way, way, way down now. So I would say, if you're a good Shakespearean, you can do anything, but you might have to learn to forget a few tricks.
Robert, you played Claudio in the movie version of Much Ado About Nothing. Was that your first experience with Shakespeare?
No, I was... I had done a film with a Merchant Ivory film in around, I think, 1989 with Austin Pendleton, who's just about the craziest man alive. And
a wonderful actor and a wonderful director.
Truly, a writer and everything, and crazy. And he said, they're doing Romeo and Juliet over at, when was it? It was the East 91st, the Shakespeare Festival. I don't think they exist anymore. you should play Romeo. And I thought I was young and stupid and said, yes, I should. And I went in and read for Charles Keating, who was directing it, who's crazy in his own right. And I dove right into playing, I think, one of the worst roles ever written. I truly despised every minute of it. But I love the play. I just wished I was Juliet the whole time. It's a horrible role. I think Shakespeare hated young men. That's my theory. I think he went to bars and they were mean to him, and he wrote roles like Claudio and Romeo and Edmund and Edgar. I mean, they're all horrible, horrible roles.
But
They
isn't it the responsibility of the actor to find something good in those roles?
Virtually impossible. But yes, you try playing Edgar in King Lear. Knock yourself out. And screaming naked from a rock and putting barbs in your skin. They're all fickle and horrible until you get to about, I don't know, Richard II is, I guess, the first kind of really fun young. You have to kind of grow into playing the really great parts if you're a guy. If you're a girl, you're set. He wrote beautiful roles for women.
Well, in the case of films like Much Ado About Nothing, which featured big-name stars, do you think that's the best way to introduce young people to Shakespeare?
No. I think to do it well is the best way to introduce them. I remember I saw a production of King Lear when I was young, and I remember clearly. It was not a professional production. I remember clearly King Lear. I just got it that the young daughter wouldn't put into words how much she loves him, and he banished her, and Kent saying, to admonishing him for that and saying his youngest daughter didn't love him least, and playing with his metaphor as intimates in Shakespeare always do when he says, out of my sight, Ken says, see better, Lear, and the way Romeo and Juliet do. They play with each other's words and images, and when a young person sees a Shakespeare play, I think it can go very, very strongly one way or the other. And if it's a good production, it can, for life, it can last with them. And if it's bad, equally, stay in.
Well, Romeo and Juliet has been that entry point for an awful lot of people, especially all the films. In the case of Much Ado About Nothing, you also had Kenneth Branagh as the director. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that helps or hinders somebody who's had such a personal approach to directing Shakespeare.
Well, I think Kenneth is one of the best things about Kenneth is he's P.T. Barnum. He's a bit of a whore. I think he's in the best way as a filmmaker. I thought Henry V was wonderfully fun to watch and smartly cut. And I think he's smart about that stuff. And I was very lucky to be cast as Claudio, and also in a film, playing Claudio in a film.
Despite the fact that you hate that part.
I hate the role, but to be honest, in a film it's much easier because they cut things that I didn't have to say some truly horrid lines that if you're playing Claudio on stage, you have to say, and that makes the audience just recoil from you forever. And also,
You're just being provocative, Robert.
Sorry. And well,
that's why so many people cut it like mad, which of course angers audience members like me. Oh boy, they took this play and cut it from 3 hours to an hour and 15 minutes. All we got was the best lines.
I think these plays about young men in Shakespeare are often about the education of the young man, and often they start in a very bad place, or you see them travel through a sort of blindness to a sort of, at least, usually they get a good woman.
Exactly.
That's sort of
All's Well is the biggest case in point. There was actually a very good production, I thought, that Theatre for New Audience did, where it made sense that Bertram could be redeemed by Helen at the end of the play, but that's a hard one to pull off too. Yeah. Really a hard one.
Well, if you notice, there are no plays about the education of young women. It's always the young men. The women start off brilliant and witty.
And in fact, they often are brilliant men at the same time, somewhere in the play. Yeah. My guests are Robert Sean Leonard and Michael Cumpsty, two of the actors performing in the 4-hour Shakespeare Marathon at the Symphony Space this Sunday in a celebration of Shakespeare's 442nd birthday, and Michael Sexton, the artistic director of the Shakespeare Society. This is WNYC. Unlike, as this discussion is suggesting, unlike most theater, every part has been performed thousands, perhaps millions of times before, and so you have to find something new in these characters. You have to, Michael, when you did Hamlet, you were following 450 years of people performing Hamlet.
Yeah. Well, people often ask me that question, and somehow or other I have to say I think it's... It's a question that doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because in the process of putting the role together, if you do it by simply discovering the truth of every moment, then it becomes unique. It has to be you, and I think it would be a much, much, much harder task actually to reproduce something that had gone before. Unless it was going to be completely hollow and only about the form, in which case it wouldn't be a reproduction, you know.
But I think with Shakespeare, more than others, for example, when there are historic figures, we don't have to worry about what the real Mark Antony was, or who Julius Caesar was, or Richard III. And so we get Richard III's who are the embodiment of evil, and Richard III's who are totally misunderstood men who have only done what they did because they had a rough childhood.
Well, that's certainly part of the reason he endures 4 centuries later. That the work, if you do approach it, as Michael says, in a personal way, and you try to discover the role afresh, you will find something new in it. There will be something there that is only yours, that will only happen during that performance that night, as a matter of fact, not just in a production, but each night. I have found something new emerges and something new appears. If you approach it personally. And I wanted to say about this sort of technical training of the actors in New York, and this is why the Shakespeare Society is so blessed to be here in New York, is that there are a tremendous number of really well-trained actors that are just longing to get their mouths around this poetry. And
this is something Joe Papp discovered years ago, and we've benefited from that.
Absolutely. And the training programs, I work at Columbia and at NYU and at Juilliard. They get tremendous training down there. And so every year, sort of 100 people come out of those 3 programs with great abilities to do this material.
You know, I say that's absolutely true. I'm directing at NYU at the moment, and the kids are immensely talented and the training is excellent, but that is kind of a small and rarefied pool, and it would be so exciting if there were opportunities for other actors who came from less prominent places where the training is not so good to sort of throw themselves into something in New York which would allow them to learn those things after they'd gone through a conservatory program somewhere else, perhaps.
Yes. And again, the Society has benefited greatly because we do 5 events for the public every year. I mean, we have many activities for our members. We teach classes in verse, and we have reading groups, and we have smaller events at our at our location on East 78th. But during the year, we do 5 public events, and we're able to do a sort of combination of performance, reading, and commentary. We've had commentators as great as Harold Bloom and Stephen Greenblatt, and a Harvard professor named Marjorie Garber, who's terrific, and she's going to be in the marathon as well.
Michael Sexton is the artistic director of the Shakespeare Society. We're talking about what's coming up this Sunday on Shakespeare's 442nd birthday for our Shakespeare Marathon. And among the participants are Robert Sean Leonard and Michael Cumpsty, also here in our studio. We'll find out what they're performing and what this event will be like after we take a little break. Stay with us. Yes, Sunday is Shakespeare's 442nd birthday, and there'll be a celebration set up by the Shakespeare Society. 4-hour marathon at Symphony Space. Michael Sexton is here. He's the artistic director of the Shakespeare Society. And we also have 2 of the actors performing in the marathon, Robert Sean Leonard and Michael Cumpsty. Michael Sexton, who else will be performing?
Tremendous group of people. Among them, Phil Bosco, Marcia Gay Harden, Michael Cumpsty, Elizabeth Marvel, Mark Lynn Baker, Keith David, Avery Brooks, Dennis O'Hare, Kate Forbes, Estelle Parsons and Fritz Weaver. Stop me anytime.
Well, this is all pretty good.
Yeah.
Marion Seldes.
So, in other words, some of the best actors working today.
Absolutely.
And most of them have a strong theater background.
Yes.
Do you think that that's a major part of all of this, Robert? That that some actors really thrive on the stage, prefer to actually work on the stage?
Yes, I've been in L.A. I'm actually doing a television show right now in L.A. and it's fascinating to me. They're different animals. They really are. It's just a different work ethic. It's not worse or better. It's just a different thing. And having come from New York, my first job was at the Public when Joe Papp still ran it. I was understudying an Albert Inurado play when I was 14, and so it's been over 20 years for me. And it's a joy that I've never felt in any other, in film or television. And it's a high you don't ever really get over.
Well, I know even when I have conducted interviews in front of audiences, it's different. There's a dynamic. You hear, even if people are coughing in the audience, it means something. If they laugh softly at something, you're spurred on. If they laugh loudly, you move in a whole other direction.
But it's not,
and every night is different, I gather, when you're performing the same play.
It's true, but it's also something, when things happen in a film and the music modulates or something happens or someone's eye tears up and it could be O.J. Simpson in Capricorn 1, and suddenly you're lifted off your seat a little bit and you're moved. I find in theater it's always the words, if it's poetry, and whether it's Shakespeare. For me, I remember seeing Arms and the Man. Maybe it was Kevin Kline, I don't remember, but and Shaw, when the young girl is being all high and mighty, and Bluntschli, the soldier, laughs at her, and she says, "What is it?" He says, "Oh, this attitude of yours, it's just, I can't stand it anymore. It's ridiculous." And she says, "You're the first man I've ever met who hasn't taken me seriously." And I remember, I'll never forget him turning to her and saying, "I think you mean, don't you, that I'm the first man you've ever met who's taken you quite seriously." And I remember that moving me so much as a kid, as a teenager. And that's what theater does to me. And it's about connections and metaphors and words, which films can be, certainly. But theater, when it's very moving, that it's always that. And I think that's what Shakespeare is certainly most known for.
The other thing is, from the actor's point of view, that your relative significance in a play is just so much greater than it is in a film or in a TV show. Even if I would imagine someone like Meryl Streep, you have in a play, you have a sort of executive position. You are controlling the evening. You're responsible for the arc. You're holding the attention of people for a couple hours and telling them a story in a way that is, in fact, the editor's function or the director's function when you're working in the other medium.
And many actors have told me that they thought they'd done a wonderful scene and then saw the film and the camera was on the other actor's face at that moment while they were delivering their best line with the best facial expression, really into the character. Well, in the case of Shakespeare, he doesn't give you many clues as to what he expects you to do physically and with the words. But a lot of actors have told me you just trust in the rhythms of the lines and you pretty much understand how to say these things. Is that the way it's worked for you, Michael?
Well, it's funny because I just had this conversation with the students I'm directing last night. People who do a lot of Shakespeare acting will often say that it kind of plays itself. If you speak it correctly, it will play itself. And I had said that to the students, and I went home thinking, well, that's an unhelpful comment. So I kind of refined it and went back, and what I said to them yesterday was, if you look at the language, if you figure out what you're saying and you look at the way it's being said, that will suggest to you, almost always, that will suggest to you what you're doing, what your intention is as an actor, what you're trying to accomplish. And if you then play that, it feels like the language plays itself. That a great deal is given to you, but you do have to recognize it and then execute it.
So why do so many people play Shakespeare at breakneck speed? I always feel like they're doing all of the lines that they think that are really unimportant as fast as they can so that they can slow down when they come to the lines that either have real power in them or that everybody knows.
That's called panic. That's just plain panic. I've given whole performances based on panic. I think I agree with Michael but I also think there's something beyond definition which is true in any play, and maybe even any film or television show. I think if an actor is smart and fascinating, and they speak the verse well, it'll be a smart, fascinating performance. If they're boring and not a very interesting person, no matter how well you speak it, it's going to be kind of a flat performance. I think it's a bit of a mystery. I think you can train for years and years and still not be a very interesting Shakespearean performer. I agree. You can't go in naked and knowing nothing and be brilliant. You do need training. But I think the magic combination is being a really interesting person and dynamic actor with good training.
How much input do you rely on dramaturges for?
Quite a bit. It depends on how good they are. You get a sense in the first few days if they know their stuff. And as Michael said, the words, in more than any other playwright, the words tell you so much about who you are and what you're doing in each moment. So if the dramaturg is familiar with the play, as they should be, and they can be a great help.
That's the equivalent of doing research, isn't it? A lot of people tell me that. Well, some actors say, "I just trust the text," and that's the end of that. I remember 2 days in a row I had Michael Gambon who said that, and then Vanessa Redgrave said, "I read every book I can about the era, the person, whatever." Sure. And they're both wonderful actors, so I guess in the end you just do what you have to do. But in the case of Shakespeare, we don't know all that much about Shakespeare. There are some people who don't even believe Shakespeare wrote Shakespeare. So how important is research? Or is that where the dramaturg comes in?
I think it depends a lot on how you choose to approach the role. As you said, that the historicity of the plays is not accurate. So going back, my hungry students are going and reading the history of Richard II and figuring out what was going on in the 1300s in England, and it doesn't really help.
You're doing Richard II in this marathon, aren't you?
I'm reading Richard II in the marathon, and I'm directing Richard II at NYU at the moment, and I may play it at the end of the year, so it's my year of Richard too. But honestly, I don't know how much good research does, but I just what you said about Vanessa Redgrave, but Anthony Hopkins and Meryl Streep, I heard them both interviewed, and Meryl Streep said she sometimes doesn't even finish reading the script. She sometimes doesn't even know what the plot is when she starts, but she immerses herself in some other practice, like learning to do Irish dancing or learning a dialect, and there's something about that immersion that frees in her the character, whereas Anthony Hopkins says he reads a script more than 100 times before he begins work. So everybody has, not everybody, but many great actors that I've heard interviewed or have spoken to myself have some sort of obsessive way of preparing. And I think research is some people's obsessive way of preparing. And it not only does it sort of put facts in your mind, but it frees something in you. Just the process of study frees something in you for the work.
My guests are Michael Cumpsty and Robert Sean Leonard, two of the actors who'll be performing in a 4-hour Shakespeare Marathon at Symphony Space, put together by the Shakespeare Society, and Michael Sexton, the artistic director of the Shakespeare Society, is also here. This is WNYC 93.9 AM 820. We're online at WNYC.org. And before we continue, I would like to also inform you that our BBC World Book Club tapings with authors Chinua Achebe and Kurt Vonnegut have filled up, thanks to those of you who called in. But you can still get on the air by emailing a question about Achebe's Things Fall Apart or Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse 5, and then on the show I will read your question to the authors. Email your questions to lopateshow@wnyc.org. That's lopateshow@wnyc.org. And I wonder, since we're talking about historicity, whatever it is, some directors, or I don't know exactly who makes these final decisions, some people feel the need to make Shakespeare more accessible by setting the place in either recent times or fairly recent times or in places other than where Shakespeare imagined them. I wonder what you think about those things. For example, I saw Richard III in a fascist dictatorship. I saw Midsummer Night's Dream in a Brazilian setting with a lot of bossa nova music in the background.
I think those can be ways of giving you a gateway into the play, both as a director, actor, and as an audience. I think when those work the best, in my opinion, those accretions disappear as the play progresses, because he's done a tremendous amount of work. Speaking of research and everything, I mean, Shakespeare's done tremendous amount of editing and decision making for you, and he has done a tremendous amount of world making as a director. You need to trust that a lot, because ultimately your ideas are going to be probably not as interesting as his ideas, and I think you can give it a sort of freshness or a sort of a surprise by putting it in certain places or in certain settings. But ultimately, the world making is Shakespeare's and the actors and the directors together. It's going to be very rarely is it sort of definitive, the sort of historical displacement of these things. I mean, when they were first performed, they were anachronistic, and I think the most important setting for any of these plays is the stage and the live moment.
But so many actors have told me that the costume is actually a part of who they are when they're on the stage, and it wouldn't matter to me if I was in a costume of 17th century England or 19th century Brazil. It becomes a different thing, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. It does. If you're, I mean, Midsummer's a little more. I think you can have a little more fun with Midsummer than the history plays. At least,
although I think everybody thinks that Julius Caesar really did say "Et tu, Brute."
I know. It's not great.
That's become historical, even though it was something that Shakespeare just thought of.
Yeah, it's become the Sic Semper Tyrannis of his period. I don't know. I think it's. I've seen productions. I think it just depends. Sometimes they can be. I think those ideas. If you're taking a historical play and putting it in a different time period, it can. As Michael said, to me, what's important is that this play is on the stage and the words are being said, and I think he's right that if it works, if the idea works, it actually isn't that overwhelming a concept. It doesn't overtake the evening. It's just sort of an interesting look.
So where is your Richard II set?
Well, because we're doing it on an extremely low budget, as in no money at all, it's not set anywhere. I mean, what we're doing is we're exploring the given circumstances, what's going on, what are the relationships, what are the facts around the lives of these people, and then trying to execute the relationships and the dialogue and the action as truthfully as possible without imposing any conceptual cover on it at all. I would say it's always about finding an intelligent balance, and no matter how gorgeous the conception is, it can't get in the way of the play, and if it does, it's wrong. It's a bad idea, bottom line. And it can be as imaginative as it likes to be, as long as it honors the play, like Michael said.
What do you think about those people who feel that Shakespeare has to be performed with an English accent?
Ew! Shoot them all, kill them dead.
Wow, strong words.
Do you know there's nothing historically accurate about expecting Shakespeare to be spoken with an English accent, because the English accent changed dramatically when the German kings were brought over, which was long after Shakespeare's time, and the chances are that the dialect that was spoken by the actors in Shakespeare's time is actually closer to a standard American dialect than anything that exists in Britain today.
And one of the reasons for that, I gather, is that some of the rhymes make more sense with an American accent than with a British accent.
Absolutely.
They do say that the Outer Banks of North Carolina, the indigenous accent in the Outer Banks of North Carolina, is the closest extant accent to Elizabethan English.
So perhaps we should insist that all those British actors, some of them who do wonderful American accents, start making the adjustment.
I think that would be a really good idea.
What are you performing, Robert?
Well, I'm currently performing a doctor in a television show. I wear a lab coat and pretend I know what I'm talking about and walk around with a clipboard looking nervous.
I'm not a doctor,
sorry.
but I play one on television when I'm not doing Henry IV.
Henry IV. I think on Sunday I'm performing Henry IV with Philip Bosco, which will be a lot more fun than pretending you're a
But
doctor.
these are excerpts, right? Is it weird
Yes.
doing an excerpt?
No. It's not at all. it's any more weird than it is to play Henry IV.
Right, and this and the scene that they're performing is one of the longest, but one of the greatest in all of Shakespeare. It's a scene at the Boar's Head Tavern.
Yeah, it's great fun.
It's just a tremendous scene.
It's Hal taking Falstaff apart, basically in front of his friends and showing him up for the fool that he is, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's a great pairing.
Is this going to be kind of Shakespeare's greatest hits? The excerpts that have been selected?
No, they're my greatest hits. I got to select most of the scenes myself. So no, it's just scenes that seemed great to me at the time. Some actors had ideas for things that they wanted to do. I knew that Michael Cumpsty had been looking at Richard II, so I thought of that. It's a tremendous speech that he'll be doing, and he'll be doing a scene with Maria Tucci as well as his queen. And among the other scenes, I mean, I guess some of it's greatest hits, but Avery Brooks and Dennis O'Hare are going to be doing Othello and Iago, which is tremendously exciting to me. Keith David's going to be reading some Prospero, Marcia Gay Harden, and so Marcia Gay Harden's going to be reading Olivia in Twelfth Night with Amy Ryan as Viola and Mark Lynn Baker as Malvolio. Tremendous parts. I mean, that's one of the things that struck me most in the assembling of this marathon is just, I mean, it sounds like a cliche or something, but just the range of characters in these plays. Just mind-boggling. Dazzling. I mean, just go from Juliet and Cleopatra and Cressida to Othello and Iago, to have written a Falstaff and written a Prospero. I mean, there's just tremendous range. You just find a universe on stage. So, come
great
for all
comedies
4
and
hours.
great tragedies and everything in between.
You know what Robert was saying earlier about the women's parts being so great? I was asked last year to do a reading at CSC with Kate Mulgrew of Antony and Cleopatra, and after the reading, Kate and the artistic director, Brian Kulick, said to me, would you do a production? And I jokingly said, well, I would if I could play Cleopatra on Fridays. So Brian got really excited and decided that this would be a great gimmick for the production and that we should switch roles on alternate performances. And I was doing Democracy at the time, this play on Broadway with a cast of 10 men, and I went rushing back to the theater and I said, hey guys, I'm going to be playing Cleopatra. And the looks I got were enough to convince me it was a really bad idea.
Of course, in Shakespeare's time, that would have been perfectly fine.
Yeah,
in fact, he would have had no other choice.
Right.
I want to thank you all so much for being with us. It's been a lot of fun. Michael Cumpsty, Robert Sean Leonard, two of the large group of wonderful actors who'll be participating in the 4-hour Shakespeare Marathon at Symphony Space this Sunday. And it's put together by the Shakespeare Society. Michael Sexton, the artistic director of the Shakespeare Society, has also been here. And go ahead, Michael.
Can I just say, you can find a program or an approximate program at our website at shakespearesociety.org, and you can click and find out who's playing what and when, and it should be a tremendous...
And is this going to cost a lot of money?
Zero money. Oh my god!
Oh my gosh.
It's completely free.
It's totally. You can wander in and out anytime you like.
The doors open at 3:30.
It'll be great.
And you can come and go as you please, and stay as long as you like.
Some of the greatest actors in the world, free.
Absolutely.
And the greatest playwright that ever lived. Not bad.
Not bad.
Thanks to the Shakespeare Society.
Yes.
Exactly.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.